Hello everyone and welcome to another XCOM 2 challenge run. This time we're doing what I think is going to be a pretty crazy run. Can we beat XCOM 2 War of the Chosen without placing our units in cover? Now cover is a pretty fundamental mechanic in XCOM 2. I believe half cover will give you an extra 20 defense, meaning enemies have 20% deducted from their to hit chance on any shot against you. And full cover works the same way, but provides 40 defense. And the inverse is of course true when we're firing at enemy units in cover, they get the defense bonus as well. So cover works just how you would expect it to. It's a lot harder to hit a unit when that unit is in cover. And when you look at maps in XCOM 2, you'll see there's lots of cover. It's everywhere. And this is because you're meant to be using it all the time. But we're going to use it none of the time. Our soldiers are just going to stand out in the open and hope for the best. What could possibly go wrong? As always, I stream these runs in full on my Twitch channel, and my second YouTube channel has archives of previous streams. So the links to both are in the description. Please check them out if you're interested. And now for the rules. Pretty much what you'd expect, but a few variations today. We're playing on Veteran difficulty, with a few caveats. We're playing on Honest Man, and we cannot place our units in cover. And there's some caveats for that last one as well. Now, in regards to the difficulty, Veteran gives you a couple of bonuses on the tactical layer that aren't present on Commander difficulty. One example, all your to-hit chances are actually multiplied by 1.1, so landing shots is easier on Veteran than Commander. Now I've modified my game's files so that the tactical layer buffs we will now get will be the same as Commander. So I'm actually playing on my own custom difficulty that's a bit harder than Veteran, but not quite as difficult as Commander. This way the campaigns can still be a bit faster, while also providing us a good challenge. And there are a couple of exceptions to the no cover rule. Certain objectives like the Blacksite vial mean we have to place a unit into cover. There's no way around this in order to beat the mission. So we'll do this as necessary, but we have to move that unit out of cover as soon as we've done the objective. Also, sometimes your units spawn on the map in cover. There's obviously nothing we can do about this, so in this situation, we'll just move them out of cover on their first turn. And placing units in cover is pretty much muscle memory to me at this point. I've played a lot of XCOM. In fact, it's so bad that this attempt you're watching is actually number 3. On the first attempt, with literally the first move of the campaign, I put a unit in cover just out of habit. And then on the second attempt I accidentally enabled the tutorial, so I had to restart again straight away. So not off to a great start, but hopefully attempt number 3 is the one. And going forward, if I accidentally place a unit into cover, which, spoiler alert, I will, we're just going to reload the turn. I'm not going to restart the campaign every time I accidentally place someone in cover. We're just going to treat it as a misclick. And honestly, remembering to not move units into cover is one of the hardest parts about this challenge. Using cover is just so ingrained into me that it honestly feels unnatural leaving our troops like this. So the first mission is a bit of a close call, mainly because we can't hide behind the statue. See, the second pod on this mission will often spawn behind the statue, so I normally get as close to it as I can, hug the sides, and use our hidden position to sneak up on the bad guys. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you can even use movement cheese to work out where the enemies are, and then you can just lob grenades from out of line of sight, take them out without any resistance. But because we have to keep our distance from the statue, we can't stand next to it because that would be in cover, that plan doesn't work so well, and the enemies see us, and they come for us. Now thankfully our troops make some kind of clutch attacks, and we still get through this one unharmed, so we're off to a good start on the third time. That is the charm after all. I build the usual suspects of the GTS, a flashbang, and a medikit. I figure we'll be taking losses on this run, so having the GTS early is probably going to be important. For the first guerrilla op, we take Drifter, who's been promoted to a grenadier, and we also bring along 3 rookies. Now things go pretty well initially. We one-shot the first pod with a single grenade, then we push through a trooper and a sectoid to destroy the transmission device. And with the device taken out, the turn timer is no longer an issue. We can take our time and go as slowly as we need to. So we move onto this roof and we activate the final pod. The sectoid is a bit of a problem here. It takes up full cover. Now I grenade the trooper with Drifter from beyond line of sight, thanks to our grenade launcher, and then I just fall back with our rookie Grey to break the sectoid's line of sight. I figure we weren't going to be able to take it down with our low aim soldiers anyway, so forcing the sectoid out of cover to come and find us is I think the best strategy here. Now since it can't see us, it raises a zombie, and it leaves itself totally flanked by our squad. And check this out, we blast this naked thing right in the skull with our rifle, and it just tanks the hit. Imagine how tough Sectoid's skin must be that it gives these guys more HP than an Advent soldier in full body armor. That is insane. Anyway, this one is one for the W column. We're off to a good start. Our rookies all get promotions, and the guy whose name is the Medic becomes a sharpshooter. And him not being a specialist is honestly going to annoy me for the rest of the run. I guess I should have sent him to the GTS. So now that we have an engineer, I get to work excavating. I'm wanting to rush the proving ground so that we can build sparks as soon as possible. These guys made the last run much easier than it would have been otherwise, and I think they'll be able to do the same this time around. See, sparks can't use cover anyway, so they're really not handicapped by this challenge whatsoever. And having a couple of them on the team I think will be extremely helpful. Now here I need to shine a bit of a spotlight on our sniper Ato on the 3rd mission. This guy makes 2 pistol shots in a row for 3 damage, taking out some 3 HP lost. He also makes some amazing shots to cover K-Barb, our meat shield. To cover K-Barb, our rookie, who has been sent in to retrieve the VIP. And I do take the time to grab the downed soldier on this one, since there's nothing stopping us from using him on this run. And we evac everybody out safely. This one went just fine. Now I had brought Drifter on the first 3 missions. I was hoping to level him up to Sergeant so we could field 5 soldiers for the Retaliation mission. And I could stay back and farm some Lost here, but honestly, I just couldn't be bothered. And we're low on supplies right now anyway, so there's no guarantee we'd be able to buy the squad size upgrade even if we did unlock it. So hopefully the first chosen doesn't give us too many problems. So this time we roll the Hunter, and he has some brutal abilities. Immunity to melee when I have once again brought 2 rangers on the mission, and he heals HP when other enemies take damage. So this one's gonna be rough. And normally I like getting the Hunter first, as I find him the easiest of the 3 to deal with in the early game. But in this run, he's probably the worst. See, the Assassin will usually flank you from hiding, and the Warlock will normally try Psionic attacks, and as far as I'm aware, Psionic attacks aren't affected by cover. I may be wrong on that one. But the Hunter, he's the most likely to just straight up shoot at you with his rifle. And of course, cover reduces the chance of a shot hitting. So this means cover is a lot more useful against the Hunter than it is against the other 2 chosen. So this is not a good roll. Things are looking pretty grim, all things considered. Now there is some good news that he's weak to explosives, so my plan is to just try and save all of our grenades, which is only 3 of them, for when we run into him. And the plan so far is working quite well. We're able to take care of Advent without issue, and then you'll see on this map there's a firing range. I've installed a map mod for this run just to spice things up a bit, and you'll notice some texture issues on this map. I assume the mod is causing them, but we won't worry about that. Now the thing about this firing range is there's some really tight corridors in there. Normally that would be fine, but for us, it makes the terrain almost impassable since it would force us into cover. So instead I decide we'll just hang back, we'll try and rescue the required 6 civilians where we are. This will then mean we can take our time dealing with the hunter, and we can go around this shooting range if we have to. But see, the hunter, he's got other plans. He grapples over the shooting range and lands right in front of us. Now he's weak to skirmishers too, so our skirmisher, whose nickname is Viper Bait, don't ask. Anyway, he's able to do good damage, and we finish the hunter off quite easily. We didn't even need the grenades. Now we did get super lucky there, he just grappled right into us and left himself very vulnerable. But you know me, a victory is a victory, so I'm just going to roll with it, and we're going to move on. On the first supply raid, things start off amazingly. Ato scores a crit and one-shots the Purifier. This causes it to explode, which also one-shots the captain that was in the pod as well. And this was simply a thing of beauty. I've made Grey a Phantom Ranger, so I push forward with her to try and find the next pod. And we do find it, but this is another new tile set from the map mod. It has this chasm that we can pass through, but there's not a lot of ways out once we enter the chasm. So we send a couple of troops in. I'm planning to jump out from around the corner and ambush Advent on the next turn, except Advent beat me to the punch as they come around the corner on their turn. So now we've got 3 enemies activated and we're completely out of position. I used Jackal the Templar to take out the trooper, but we really are out of position here. This is not going to go well. I mean, Ato only has a 27% shot on the Viper. So I move him, figuring he can fire with squad sight next turn, and then I opt to drop Jackal over the cliff face. This will put him out of line of sight of the enemies, and hopefully keep him safe. The only problem is, when he drops down, he activates another pod. And that was our last action too, so we've got 5 enemies gunning for us now, with no way to defend ourselves. Now we did flashbang the first Viper and Stun Lancer, so they're not much of a threat, but then Jackal is bound and K-Bub has taken damage. And the most annoying part is if I'd left Ato where he was, he'd have line of sight on this new pod, but now he has to waste another turn on movement. Jackal gets knocked unconscious and K-Bub is sadly smushed to death by one of the Vipers. That's our first casualty of the run. I consider evacing out here, but if we do that, we're going to lose the supplies and we're going to lose our Templar. So we push on and we do make a bit of a comeback and things are looking okay. There's 1 Viper left and it has Grey bound. Now she is down to 1 HP, so if we can't finish this thing this turn, we're going to lose another soldier. But it should be okay. Drifter is at point blank range, so he can totally miss and screw the whole team over. Awesome, thanks. Okay, so now it comes down to a 30% shot with Ato. He shoots and he scores. My goodness, this man is a legend. That shot frees Grey, who can then waste the Viper, and we're victorious. This was quite the comeback, but we did it. No thanks to Drifter. The next few missions go off quite well, and before too long we now have 2 Sparks to deploy, and I should mention that Sparks are pretty expensive, particularly with Elerium cores. It requires 2 per Spark. We have the Vulture Resistance Order active, and that makes enemies drop additional loot items. Now this was invaluable in getting our Sparks built early. Also, one of our Sparks is named Medic. So we now have a sniper named Medic and a giant robot named Medic. I'm sure this won't get confusing whatsoever. I've uninstalled the mod that lets us skip ambush missions because of the issues with will recovery that it was giving us, so that means we have to play these boring ambush missions once again. And I think I accidentally moved someone into cover about 4 times on this one. I reloaded each time though, but it just made a tedious mission take longer and thus become even more tedious. However, later in the run, we will get hold of the resistance card that lets us skip ambush missions, so then we don't have to worry about them anymore. But getting back to our Sparks, we can deploy them both on the next Retaliation mission, and the really nice thing about Sparks is I don't have to worry about where I'm placing them. Even if I stand them next to cover, they won't utilize it. They can't make use of cover. So we can park these guys on any tile we want without issue. And this is a nice bit of flexibility to have. Especially on this map, it's pretty crazy. There's trees offering full cover all over the place, and we're not allowed to use any of them. It's horrible. So we end up with quite a few civilians held up in a building, and we've got stun lancers beginning to swarm all around them. So we need to hurry here. And not using cover is always an issue when we're dealing with buildings, as we're pretty limited to where we can place our troops. We can't stand next to any of the walls or corners. And here we make a 63% shot with Avian to take out a trooper. I'm really impressed that she made that. However, then I mess it all up by misclicking with our Spark Medic. It was a really annoying misclick too. My mouse just shifted slightly as I clicked down. This caused us to be one tile further than what I wanted. So I reload the turn, it is a misclick, but what are the chances you think we can make that 63% shot again? Yeah, it's not happening. And this results in the trooper surviving and damaging our ranger Izusushi. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Now we still win the mission and we take no casualties, so it was fine, but I was still salty about this. I was really annoyed that we took damage there when we didn't need to. Not as salty as the supply raid, but still fairly well seasoned. Then I spend pretty much all our resources at the black market. I want to get enough supplies to upgrade the armor of both our Sparks and our human operatives. And after I do that, we're down to 25 intel and 1 supply. This is hard times, but I figure the extra HP could go a long way to keeping our soldiers alive, so hopefully our investment will pay off. Also, we've gotten a lot of covert ops that give a promotion as a reward, and because of this, Viper Bait is actually at major level already, and we can send him off to find the entrance to the hunter's base. Now I don't attack the hunter right away, instead I want to wait until we've leveled up a little bit more, and pretty much all our soldiers have tier 2 weapons. And while we're waiting, we have a supply raid mission. This is one of the loot box ones. Now the loot boxes do provide cover, but I'm going to allow it. Tagging the boxes is part of the mission objective, so we can use cover in this instance, as long as we move away from the box as soon as we've tagged it. Although the box gets taken up into the Sky Ranger once you've tagged it anyway, so that probably doesn't really matter in this case. Alright, then it's time to go get the hunter. Now this is much earlier than I would normally do this mission, but that's the whole point of playing on Veteran. We can tackle tough missions a bit more quickly, save ourselves some time. Now inside the first area, there's a pod of a Berserker and a few Advent. I've scouted them with our Reaper, Gonzalez. I spend an absolute age waiting to trigger them with an Overwatch ambush, and we eventually do. Now we're not in a rush, so it's not a big deal, it just takes quite a bit of time. And the Berserker actually goes down to the Overwatch blitz, so that makes things much easier on our turn. We take out the rest of the Advent forces, but then we get some nonsense. And it's my least favourite kind of nonsense. Line of sight nonsense. Despite the doors being closed, the pod inside the elevator room still sees us and activates. I think we had shot a hole in the wall at some point and they saw us through the gap. Now the pod consists of 3 Vipers and a Spectre. I really don't want to get poisoned here, so we use a rocket from Medic. I'd rather hold on to our rockets, but this is a bit of an emergency. And we're thankfully able to take out the 3 Vipers on our turn. That's the main thing that I wanted to do. And the Spectre only uses Shadowbound. We can then easily wipe it out on the next turn. That could have gone much worse if we hadn't made some difficult shots. Our team really came through for us on this one. I use a rocket on the Hunter, both to inflict big damage on him and to reduce his full cover down to half cover. Now we would have had this one in the bag quite easily, but Medic misses a 91% shot. And he actually missed another 91% shot earlier in this very same mission. He's really letting us down on this one. Now thanks to Overdrive with our other Spark, we can still end the Hunter this turn, but we're not able to deal very much damage to the sarcophagus. This creates a problem. 2 Mutons spawn in, and I get left with a very difficult decision to make. I've got 1 action left with Drifter, and we can either finish off the sarcophagus or flashbang the Mutons. We don't even have mimic beacons yet. I'm being pretty wild in this run. So I thought about it, and I remembered back to the failed sharpshooter run and how not prioritizing the sarcophagus really hurt us. In fact, it ended the campaign. So I decide we're going to ignore the mutons and we destroy the sarcophagus. I mean, for all I know, 2 berserkers could spawn in on the next turn and then we would be in real trouble. Now, one of the mutons tries a melee on our blue spark, who I'm going to refer to as Big Blue for the rest of the video, but thankfully that one misses. And then the second muton lobs a grenade, Drifter takes some damage, but somehow the grenade misses Medic. That's pretty out there. So we've taken minimal damage, and the Hunter is back, and he has very little health. And it turns out I made the right decision as we end this one with a single rocket. No more Hunter to worry about. The next council mission is pretty wild. Grey gets panicked by a sectoid and she heads straight for a couple of civilians with a grenade in her hands. I think I may have a new favourite soldier, everyone. This one's also interesting because we get glitched and the VIP isn't able to exit the truck. I have had this happen before. I think it can occur with some map mods. So if you find yourself in this situation, a grenade just touching the walls of the truck can destroy them, and that will free your VIP. But you don't want the blast to be in the truck itself, because then your very important person will become your very dead person. Or you can probably just use a console command to teleport them somewhere else. That probably works too. As we're heading to the evac, a captain drops down with the reinforcements, and this is actually good. I'm wanting to skulljack a captain so that we can progress the story. Oh. Never mind then. Maybe on the next mission. Anyway, we make it out of this one alive. Well, except for those civilians, of course. We have a retaliation mission in the Warlock's territory, and given this is our first outing on his turf, he drops in to welcome us to the neighbourhood. Now his abilities are General, Watchful, and Shadow Step. None of those are all that bad, to be honest. His weaknesses are Bewildered and Templars. I didn't bring any Templars on this mission, however. We do skulljack a captain on this one, which brings in our first codex, and in the process of doing so, I activate the Warlock. Now this is pretty bad. Task Manager is exposed out on his own with both the Warlock and the codex. Now we have researched the Hunter's weapons and given them to Ato by this point. That's one of the perks of doing the Chosen Assault so early. And even better, we've gotten research breakthroughs for +1 damage on our pistols and our sniper rifles. So Ato's going to be doing big damage. And he makes this 81% shot from across the map and he takes half the Warlock's health. This guy is still putting in really good work. The Codex hits us with a Psy-Bomb and the Warlock lands a Mind Scorch on Task Manager. Ato uses Lightning Hands to get rid of the Codex. And then we just need him to repeat that 81% shot on the Warlock. And he does it. Skullet Man just got smoked. And Ato is quickly becoming the MVP of this run. But now the game ramps up the BS factor something rancid. It's a supply raid with low profile. That means no one above a sergeant is allowed on this mission. We only have 5 soldiers of that level, and 2 of them are rookies. So we have to recruit another rookie, so we're fielding 3 of them, along with a Templar, a Ranger, and a Sharpshooter. Now thankfully we can make use of the Hunter's weapons on our Sharpshooter, but if we get squad wiped and lose those guns, I'm going to be a deeply unhappy man. So we're hanging out between a train and some cliffs, and there's barely anywhere to stand that isn't in cover. Now my plan is to eventually get onto the ridge and take the high ground, but I'm taking my time to do it. There could be enemies up there waiting for us. We don't want to rush in and be left out of position. So just as we get to a ladder we can climb up and we can finally go up there, a Viper and an Archon come cruising over the train with thoughts about annihilating us. Now our noobs do their noob thing and we're missing shots like our troops are conscientious objectors. Thankfully, Cross-Eye, however, is ready to go, and he one-shots the Viper with a crit. Now, we somehow manage to take that pod down, but another one immediately comes over the train to get us. This is not going well. Jackal takes down the trooper to get some focus, and the other soldiers we just flank and shoot. And it actually goes well, we take this pod down too. We're still alive, this is going much better than I expected. But soon we get a bad activation with a codex and 2 mutons. I start with a flashbang, this will stop the codex from cloning, and it'll also stop the mutons from using counterattack. And with the help of some plasma grenades, we take this pod down too. And I was expecting a 4th one on this mission, but there is none. So we just pulled this off with a flawless victory. Half our team were rookies. I have no idea how we managed that, but I'm taking it. I then decide to hit the Blacksite before Andromedon starts spawning in. We might as well go now. And I honestly don't have much to say about this one. We go in, we destroy all the bad guys, and we take the Vial. Now the Vial does require us to use cover, but since it's a mission objective, it's allowed. But yeah, this one wasn't very eventful. I mean, there's no Chosen, there's no Andromedons, it's an early game mission, we're doing it much later than we should, so Advent never really had a chance here. We have a council mission to extract a VIP, and I have to say, not being able to place the VIP in cover when you're not able to alpha strike the enemies is really, really scary. And I end up just running this guy to the edge of the map, just trying to keep him out of reach of the bad guys. And it thankfully works, he survives. Also on this one, I accidentally broke my no cover rule twice. I hadn't done it for ages, but I think my concentration was just slipping here. The first time was completely my fault, I just stopped this grenadier next to a car out of habit. I only realised on the turn after, and I didn't want to reload the entire turn, and there were no enemies active on the map anyway, so it made no difference to the run, we just continued on. Now the second time wasn't really my fault. I'm in the process of moving the VIP to a non-cover tile, but just as I click on the tile, another soldier runs past. I had moved him just before, he was still completing his action. Now this causes my cursor to move to a different tile, and the VIP ends up in cover. Now again, there's no enemies active on the map, so I'm not going to bother reloading. It makes no difference, it'll only slow us down unnecessarily. Ain't nobody got time for that. Then we head out to the Warlock stronghold. Having a colonel so early on is allowing us to blitz through these chosen covert ops. We got really lucky with our promotions on this run. We wipe out this pot of chrysalids easily enough, except for the fact I accidentally placed Jackal in cover while using his rend attack. Okay, so we need to reload and try that one again, and on take 2 the lids go down just as easily as the first time. And then we encounter our first Andromedon, and I'm not real happy about that. I don't want to see these guys. And this one has taken up full cover as well. Or at least it was in full cover. It's not anymore. And now that it's exposed, we can take it down quite easily. We push through the rest of the first area without much trouble. Then in the final chamber, we've got the Warlock himself. And he runs right up to us, taking half cover right underneath us. I have no idea what this guy is thinking that this is a good place to set up. I mean, I'm the guy refusing to use cover for the whole campaign, so maybe I shouldn't be judging him. But whatever, we take this guy out with ease. I have no idea why he did this. Now, because I'm a fool and don't use the Templar, which the Warlock is weak to straight away, it takes us more attacks than necessary to finish him off, and this means that we can't do very much damage to the sarcophagus this turn. So on the next turn, I use an overdrive on Medic to try and get through the sarcophagus as quickly as possible. And the problem here is some of our soldiers don't have line of sight on it, and we can't move them without running Overwatch from the 2 heavy mechs that just spawned in. Now, given how much damage these things can do, I don't want to risk anybody running the Overwatch. So I use Ato to remove the Overwatches first, and by this point he also has blue screen rounds on his hunter weapons, so he's pretty OP. And needless to say, the sarcophagus is taken down this turn. And when the Warlock returns, well, he only has 8 HP, and Drifter's cannon can do a maximum of 8 damage, so yeah, this one's over. We have a guerrilla op, and I think this map is from the mod. There's this cliff face, but there's no way to climb up it. Instead, our only way up, at least for the human soldiers, is through this house that's built into the cliff face. Now this house is really cool, I would totally live here. However, we get a bad pod activation and our concealment is gone. Now we don't have the mobility to get through the house in one turn and attack these guys, so we're going to have to take them on from the low ground. Now that's not the best position strategically, but we are able to mop up the pod all the same. The Sparks were able to just jump up the cliff face, so they at least had a good position. So then we push ahead into the house, and we're very limited with where we can stand. There's a lot of cover in this place, it is a building. And as if that wasn't bad enough, it's also full of lost. Maybe I don't want to live here after all. And as if all of that wasn't bad enough, we get another pod activation. And I end up clustering our troops on this staircase. It's the only place we can be out of line of sight and not in cover. And what kind of horror show house doesn't have railings on the stairs? This is an accident waiting to happen. Now, of course, the Codex just happens to know exactly where we are. It teleports on top of us and drops a psionic bomb. And this is very bad. We're out of position, and now we're out of ammo as well. So it's time for the Sparks to save the day. I go for a rocket on the sectoids. I'm hoping we'll one-shot at least one of them, but no luck. They both just hang on with a sliver of HP. And of course the rocket brings in more lost. So by doing this, I've actually made things worse, not better. I place Medic on the roof and we activate Overdrive. He takes down a lot of bad guys, and we are actually able to finish off the Advent forces. Now, a few of the lost do survive, but they're not an issue, and the rest of the mission doesn't pose us any problems. So I'm not really sure how we made it through that one. It seemed pretty bad there, but we did, so it's all good. Then we have another Retaliation mission, and the Assassin debuts on this one. Her strengths are Beastmaster, Revenge, and Regeneration. Not great, to be honest. Her weaknesses are Brittle and Reapers. Now there are chrysalids on this mission too, but they don't seem to burrow underground for some reason. I've no idea why, but it makes them much easier to exterminate, so we will take it. And the Assassin, unfortunately for her, gets revealed by a Resistance operative. And what's even worse for her, we've got the flank position. So yeah, she doesn't last long on this one. But straight after this mission, she picks up immunity to explosions, so she may be a tougher challenge next time. Probably not, but who knows. And before too long, we finally constructed a Scilab. Now I start training a couple of rookies, but to be honest, the pace that we're moving at through this campaign, I'm not sure we'll have time to finish these guys' training before I'm ready to end the run, so I guess we'll just have to see how we go. With the Warlock disposed of, I figure we should hit the Forge mission. Our Reaper has become a bit of a monster by this stage. She's picked up the Shredder and tactical rigging abilities. This means we can load her up with blue screen rounds, and her Banish ability just became a lot more dangerous. Now things go sideways really fast in this one. We activate a pod of a Captain and Stun Lancer, and the Captain runs right into Gonzalez and blows her shadow concealment. Now this, in turn, activates the sectopod. And there's also a turret in the mix, just for good measure. But like I said, we've got Banish, plus Shred, plus blue screen rounds. The sectopod really isn't a problem for us. We then mop up the rest of the Advent forces and we push ahead. Now we have to cross a bridge in this mission, and that actually poses a bit of a problem for us. There's barely any room on this thing as most of the tiles are in cover. Now we could just sprint through the bridge, but there's bad guys waiting for us on the other side. So if we double move, we'd be exposed on the other side with a bunch of active enemies while we were unable to attack or defend ourselves. And that wouldn't be real good. So we kind of end up splitting into two groups. One lot of soldiers goes through first, while the others have to wait for the next turn so that there's room for them on the bridge. Now this of course means the troops at the front are going to have to deal with the enemy pod on their own. But it ends up not being as bad as it sounds, since 2 of the 3 Advent troops take cover next to this car. So a remote start later, and now we have only one bad guy remaining. And we get pretty lucky that the priest didn't go into sustain, so this was a little bit annoying, but it was nothing that we couldn't handle. And the rest of the mission is pretty easy, honestly. We grab the prototype, we make our own exit in the wall, and then we bounce out of here before the reinforcements can do anything. Then we have a resistance mission, and I take a couple of lower level soldiers on this one, partly to give them XP, and partly because our barracks is looking a little worse for wear right now. We move into the top floor of a building, and it's only once we arrive at the windows that I realise what a terrible mistake that I've made. See, the key word I used there is windows. You know, the things that are usually built into walls. Walls that provide cover. So this high ground that we've just gotten to is pretty much useless. The sparks are the only ones who can actually go up to the window to look out. Everyone else is just kind of left standing awkwardly in the living room. But it's too late to change things now, so we just move forward with our spark to have a look out the window, and this is what happens.
Proceeding to target. Concealment no longer viable. Uncontrolled variable in targeting sequence. No armor penetration. I apologize for your untimely death.
Yeah, that's every advent pod on the map we just activated. At least I think it's every pod. And we've got a sectopod, Andromedon, Codex, multiple Archons, and a bunch of advent soldiers. As the first order of business, I move Ato down to the ground. My plan is to then grapple onto the shipping container and hopefully abuse death from above like there's no tomorrow. Which, for our troops, there very well may not be at this rate. But then we get what I'm going to refer to as the Mox glitch. And regular viewers may know the one I'm talking about, where your grappling hook says that there's nowhere to grapple to, despite this obviously being a gigantic lie and there being plenty of places to grapple to. I even try clicking off Ato and then back on him, which normally solves the issue, but not this time. We're not grappling anywhere, and without that height advantage, we can't use death from above with our sniper rifle. So just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, they have officially gotten worse. So I spend an eternity deciding what to do, and of course activating overdrive on one of our sparks is the obvious answer. We're going to need as many attacks as we can get. And after I do this, we can actually grapple with Ato again. I have no idea what is going on here, but we scramble to that shipping container as fast as we can. And the combination of death from above and headshots on the Lost actually lets us mop up quite a few enemies here, including the sectopod. But despite our best efforts, there's still quite a few enemies left as well. Now I think this was the first mission where we were fielding 2 mimic beacons, and thank goodness that we are. I chuck both of them down, but we have a problem. The Andromedon appears to be attacking last out of the Advent enemies. Now that's the exact opposite of what I want. And we get down to 1 Mimic Beacon with 3 HP, but the Codex still hasn't had its turn. If it destroys this last Mimic Beacon, that Andromedon is probably going to launch an acid bomb that will annihilate everybody still inside that building. But in a brilliant stroke of luck, the Codex targets the Lost. I have no idea why it did this, maybe because the beacon wasn't directly in its line of sight. I'm not sure exactly what the reason, but whatever it is, it saved us from what was probably going to be a squad wipe. So that's really awesome. But we're not out of the woods just yet. There's still about half a dozen Advent, as well as a legion of Lost that we need to deal with, and we're now out of Mimic Beacons. We need to deal with these guys this turn before they get to hit us back. Now, despite the situation we're in being far from great, I start to ponder a possibility here, And some people in chat tell me that I'm mad, and they may just be right. But see, we do have the Frost Bomb by this stage, so if I can deal with these enemies, we could potentially freeze that Codex this turn, and then Skulljack it next turn to meet the Avatar. It's a risky play, but let's go for it. And we actually are able to take down the rest of Advent and Frostbomb the Codex. There are still some lost about, but nothing that we can't handle. And also while we're doing this, I'm gradually moving towards one of the nearby extra soldiers that we can grab on this mission. I would have done this earlier, but it would have required a yellow dash, which would mean missing out on an opportunity to attack, so it wasn't really worth doing earlier, even though things were looking bad. Now our Grenadier, Duncakes, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, is actually able to use the Frostbomb twice thanks to his heavy ordnance ability. I pronounced it right that time. So we can freeze the Avatar as well, which will stop it from teleporting and make it much easier to destroy. We blow up its cover, but of course all these explosions then bring in more Lost. Now we do take some damage from them, but we've eliminated the Avatar, and that's the main thing. Once the Lost are dealt with, we grab the other free soldier as we make our way to the evac zone. And despite how bad things looked on this one, everyone made it home in one piece, and we progressed the story too. This was quite the comeback, if I do say so myself. Here our Templar reaches Colonel level, and I cannot emphasize my disappointment in this man enough. Templars have 3 really awesome hidden abilities: Reaper, Fortress, and Bladestorm. And this guy has rolled none of those 3. Worst Templar ever. We have a Guerrilla Op with the Horde sit rep, and of course the Assassin drops in, because that's what the Chosen do on Horde missions apparently. This has been happening to me a lot lately. I've brought a lot of low-level soldiers on this one too, as most of our higher-level operatives are tired, and I figured the low-level guys could handle the Lost. However, we do have our Spark Boys to provide backup for our noobs here, so hopefully they'll be safe. And the reward for this mission is only supplies, which we don't really need right now, so instead of taking on the Assassin with these low-level soldiers, I decide we're just going to hack the objective and then run away. And so in order to avoid this happening again, and to make the Psionic Gate mission that much easier, I decide we're heading to the Assassin Stronghold. We encounter a pod of an Archon and 3 Codexes, never mind, make that 2 Codexes, but they end up cloning, so then we've got 4 of them to deal with. Now that's not great, but we thankfully also have face-off with Ato, so we can actually take these enemies down without much issue. I made sure to bring 2 specialists for this one, so we have 2 uses of scanning protocol. A banish with Gonzalez quickly puts the assassin down, and we then get to work on the sarcophagus. Now we're not able to destroy it, and an Andromedon and a Berserker drop in. So as usual, as scary as that may seem, we want to ignore these reinforcements and focus on the sarcophagus first. And then once it's dealt with, we actually take out the Berserker, and we send the Andromedon into its second form, and the punching boy can easily be distracted with a Mimic Beacon. So one more scanning protocol reveals the assassin again, and I'm actually feeling so confident about beating her that I take out the Andromedon shell first just to get some XP. Then Medic takes a 91% shot against the assassin, but of course this is a chosen stronghold and the chance to hit is 91%, so of course Medic misses. Now it's no big deal, we do have Ato and he's got Fanfire, and I don't need to use Fanfire here, she only has 5 HP left, but I can use it, so I do, and I have no regrets. Once we've researched the assassin's weapons, we head to the Psionic Gate mission. Giving the assassin's katana to a Blademaster Ranger makes this mission much easier. The burrowed chrysalids become a joke, and we win this one quite easily, but there is something a little bit interesting. See, I used Wrath on a Spectre. I wanted Viperbait to place himself in the middle of the pod so we could hopefully hit some retribution attacks. But instead of doing that, he hurls himself onto the other side of the Spectre and places himself in cover, and he activates another pod at the same time. So I wasn't sure what to do here. See, Wrath is a bit of a strange ability. It doesn't let you choose the placement of the soldier. So should I reload here or not? And the chat was pretty divided on this one. Some people said yes, other people said no. And for me, this is the same as when Grey panicked earlier in the run. She put herself into cover. I didn't order her to do that. And it's the same thing here with Viperbait. I didn't choose to place him on that tile, he just went there. And if I reload here, it honestly feels like I'm giving myself an advantage since I know where that other pod is now. And the same thing with Grey, should I reload the turn so that she didn't panic? So ultimately I decide I didn't place him in the cover, I didn't utilise cover, so I'm not going to reload. Instead I just move him out of cover straight away, and we continue on with the turn. And after that mission, the Hunter UFO finds us, and my goodness, there's quite a bit to say about this one. It was not easy. And the first thing you might notice is the map itself. It is absolutely brutal. It's a series of cliff faces with the highest peak in the middle of the map, and then 2 lower areas on either side. So basically we're going to have to get to the high ground and then prevent Advent from passing through it. We get a pretty questionable pod activation of a captain and a lancer. Now thankfully, and by complete coincidence, I had stood Gonzalez at the top of the closest ladder to the pod, and Advent can't actually spot her from below, so she's really slowed down their progress in being able to get up to us. They're going to have to go around the long way, so that's quite nice. However, it doesn't stop the heavy mech since it can just jump up wherever it wants. We take down quite a few enemies, but I do kind of forget just how many active enemies there are. Some of them are out of line of sight as they're right under the ridge. So a stun lancer comes charging in and leaves Ato, who is our best soldier, on 1 HP. Then a purifier throws a grenade, and I was really panicking that Ato would be caught in the blast. Now thankfully that doesn't happen. However, Drifter is on fire, so that's not real good. And the worst part about this is I could have easily prevented all these attacks just by throwing a Mimic Beacon. This is all happening because I wasn't paying enough attention. And to make matters worse, Ato has lost an action point from that Stun Lancer, otherwise I would have moved him closer to the edge of the ridge to exploit death from above. However, for possibly the first time in his life, Bradford has actually done something useful. He sent out Viperbait as a reinforcement, and Viperbait has combat presence. So Ato can get his lost action point back, and then we can start laying waste to some fools with his sniper rifle. This was really clutch timing, this helped us out quite a bit. So once the bad guys are dealt with, we push forward with Gonzalez. And to my surprise, Ato can actually use Squad Sight to target the disruptor device. I did try to blow it up with a claymore, but there's just nowhere that we can plant it without also activating the pod that's standing guard, and I'd rather not do that if we can avoid it. So we just spend 2 turns with Ato shooting at the disruptor, and he takes it out. However, this terrain has slowed down our progress significantly, so while this is going on, we're having to engage with multiple waves of enemy reinforcements. But honestly, no matter how many enemies Advent throw at us, we can just keep destroying them. And eventually we all make it back to the Avenger, and we leave this horrible place behind us. And a really close call there. Losing Ato would have been disastrous. But we persevered and everyone made it out alive. However, the bad news is Ato is wounded for 22 days. So this prompts me to finally build an infirmary. And yeah, we haven't needed one until now. I really didn't expect that. We have a Gorilla Op and an Andromedon flanks us in concealment. Now when you're concealed, enemies have a chance to shoot at you rather than scattering to cover if they get you flanked. And I see this Andromedon raising its weapon, and I start to panic. This is not good. We're still only at level 2 armor. That thing could easily one-shot us. So I'm preparing my eulogy notes for one of these poor soldiers. but thankfully the Andromedon targets Jackal. I've spent the whole campaign increasing his dodge stat, so he only takes 5 damage, and that was another really close call. And once that pod is dealt with, we climb onto this train carriage and we activate a sectopod. Now we've already got another active pod on top of that, so I'm really not ready for this. However, we'll do the best we can. There's a trooper and a purifier with 1 HP and 6 HP left respectively. Now I can hit both of these guys with a bombard, and this does a minimum of 6 damage. So these guys are gone, right? They can't survive that. Well, actually, it turns out they can. A minimum 6 damage attack only did 5 damage. Now this is ridiculous. So I end up having to send Jackal in with Rend to finish this cheating Joker off, and in my frustration, I place him in cover in the process. So now I have to reload. I activate the sectopod again. It would feel like cheating if I didn't, but the thing is, I'm still frustrated and I'm not really thinking clearly, so I send Jackal in to Rend again, but this time I forget to hack the objective first. And when we rend it, the purifier blows up, taking the objective with it. We just failed the mission. Sometimes I hate this game. So I take out my rage on Advent and we wipe them from the face of the earth. Let's move on and never speak of this mission again. And the next one is actually another guerrilla op, which honestly feels a bit strange, but you do get less missions as the campaign progresses. So we use Gonzalez to scout ahead, and she spotted a sectopod at the back of the map. Now there's also a pod inside of this warehouse. Now my plan is to enter the warehouse, and we should be able to deal with the enemies in there without activating the sectopod. Then we can go and get it later. So I start moving everyone except Gonzalez up to this roller door. We can then open the door on our next turn, surprise the bad guys inside, and take them out quite easily. That is, unless this civilian runs through the door to get away from us and opens it before we're ready. So this guy is full-on collaborator. He's doing everything he can to get us gunned down by aliens. Huh, and look at this. Really civilian. You want to take cover next to a forklift on a mission where we have remote start. Well, okay then, if that's how you want it. And thanks to Crosseye making a hack, we actually get all our action points refunded this turn and we can attack all over again. So despite that civilian's best efforts to throw us under the bus, we mopped this pod up easily. And then Banish also easily disposes of the sectopod. There's a couple of Advent soldiers left, but they present no issues for us. This one's in the bag. Then we're just waiting for research to finish and for our psyops to level up all the way before we hit the final 2 missions. I do research powered armor and plasma rifles, but I don't worry about any of the other tier 3 guns. We shouldn't need them, and again, this is why I'm playing on veteran, so we can end the campaign a bit more quickly, even if it means we don't have all the best tools at our disposal. Now while we're waiting, we have a UFO raid mission. There's this Archon on low health, and I only have 1 shot left with Medic. Now it's an 81% chance to hit, which is okay, but it's far from guaranteed, especially when we're talking about Medic. I consider activating Overdrive, but I'd rather save it, so instead I just move closer before taking the shot. This should increase our accuracy, and activate a sectopod at the same time. Oh no. This is bad. So I do end up using Overdrive, and once the Archon is dealt with, I move Medic right in front of the sectopod. He has a much better chance of surviving an attack from this thing than our human soldiers do, so I'm basically trying to use him as bait. And Medic does take damage, but Notch does too. In fact, Notch takes the last damage that he'll ever take, at least in this campaign. And that's our second casualty of the run. Now this was just a really unfortunate pod activation. I shouldn't have moved forward with Medic. Now, thankfully we don't lose anyone else, but Medic has sustained big damage, and it means he's not going to be at full health for the final missions, so that's not ideal. And speaking of the final missions, we're now ready to hit them. We can only afford 2 out of 4 intel upgrades for the network tower, so I buy individual concealment and squad sight for each soldier. My thinking is that this will allow us to replicate the usual Reaper plus Sharpshooter combo to always activate pods on the enemy turn. We can send a concealed soldier out, have a non-concealed soldier start the engagement with Overwatch. However, it's only once I'm in the mission that I realise that strategy only works because the Sharpshooters have the Long Watch ability, which none of these soldiers have. So that wasn't very smart of me. Wasted some intel on that one, should have picked some different abilities. There's not going to be any Overwatch ambushes for us. And even better, I activate 2 pods at once here. Now thankfully using Reaper with Sushi and having a Mimic Beacon saves our hides. We then dominate the enemy Archon and we push forward. And we actually find the final pod right on top of the objective, so we can just totally ignore them, hack the computer system, and win. That was actually pretty easy. And so now the final mission. Medic is almost at full health for this one, he's 2 HP off, so shouldn't be too bad. And the beginning of this mission is business as usual. We want to scout ahead with the Reaper, and we also want to make sure the Templar gets some kills quickly to fill up his focus bar. Now the Gatekeeper is at the beginning of the map this time, and as we activate it, it opens its shell and I start to panic that it's going to get a free attack on us, just like it did in the last run. Now thankfully it doesn't, it only moves, but this thing still isn't behaving properly and it's making me nervous. And the pod itself is not real good. There's 2 Andromedons backing up the Gatekeeper, so we're dealing with a lot of HP here. And we're actually not able to take out one of the Andromedons, but thanks to stasis, we can shut it down, and then we can go and deal with it on the next turn. This one went fine. And the rest of this area is pretty uneventful. None of the pods really give us any trouble. Even the final one of the 2 sectopods and 2 heavy mechs goes down without any issues. So I guess we're just moving on to the final chamber. And here I use the usual strategy of starting with Banish on the avatar, and the first one is toast, 1 down, 2 to go. Now we try to dominate one of the Archons with our Psi operative, but he fails the 90% success chance. I was pretty unhappy about this, I do have to admit. Now the avatar has a 100% chance to mind control, so we can just use that instead. Now its mind control isn't permanent, but it should last enough turns to see us to the end of the mission, so it might as well be permanent. The first 2 pods of reinforcements are both sectoids. These things are honestly a joke by this point in the game, so needless to say, they go down pretty fast. However, the second wave ramps things up a bit. The avatar is surrounded by mutons and spectres, but there's also another pod of weakling sectoids, just for good measure. And as always in these situations, the avatar is priority number 1. Now it already took some Overwatch damage, which is really good, and we then hit it with a Dimensional Rift from our avatar and a Null Lance from our Psyop. So we took down the avatar with psionic attacks. That's pretty cool. We're able to get rid of all the enemies except for a single Spectre. It makes a copy of Gonzalez, but that's really not a big problem. See, our Specialist Task Manager actually picked up Rapid Fire as a hidden ability, so we can easily destroy that Spectre, unless I accidentally target the clone instead, that is. Now this was a misclick, so I did consider reloading, but we have taken the clone out, so we do have control of Gonzalez again. Instead of reloading, how about we just do this?
Now we wait.
Yeah, that was definitely more enjoyable than a reload. And I intentionally blew up our mind-controlled Archon, just in case the mind control doesn't last as long as I think it does. With only a little bit of HP left, this would put us in a good position to finish it off if we need to. So now we have a pod of Archons warp in, and these guys are obviously more dangerous than sectoids. Now we can only finish off one of them, but we put one in stasis and we stun the other for 2 turns. So yeah, they're not going to be bothering us on their turn. And then the final avatar is here, and in this situation we want to ignore every other enemy on the map. As long as we can finish this thing this turn, it's game over for Advent. So we start with a blaster bomb, which does good damage. Then I use Ionic Storm with Jackal to inflict a whopping 19 damage, and this one is over. I guess he was a decent Templar after all. So yeah, this is another challenge run in the bag. And honestly, this wasn't nearly as difficult as I expected. Now the sparks were a massive help, and I'm loving these guys more and more each time I use them. But I think the other thing about this run is that for the most part, it fit really well with my overall strategy of how I play the game. See, I have a really aggressive playstyle where it's all about eliminating or otherwise disabling all the enemies before they can get a chance to attack. And this challenge of not using cover just gave me even more motivation to use that same strategy and hit Advent as hard and as fast as I could. So this one was kinda right up my alley, I guess. So that'll do it for me. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you enjoyed this one, please consider leaving a like, a comment, and subscribing to the channel, and I'll be back with another challenge run soon. Until then, have a great day.